Okay, tonight is John chapter 4.
When therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee.
Okay, in the last chapter, we had read where Jesus' disciples were baptizing people, and John the Baptist was baptizing people. And they were kind of at two different locations, and there was something made out of the fact that there was almost like some of them, maybe the Pharisees were trying to pit the one against the other, saying to John, hey look, Jesus is baptizing more than you are, or saying that John is baptizing more than you are. So here you'll see in this part, it says, when the Lord heard that that this was going on, so he said, well, I think it's time that I move on then and do other things that I need to do, and instead of making it out like I'm trying to compete with John the Baptist. So that's why he says he moved on. He left Judea and departed for Galilee. Right, and then you see the parenthetical note there in verse 2, which we did reference that last week in the previous chapter. It says, though Jesus himself baptized not but his disciples. Right, so because the way that it was worded in the previous chapter, it said Jesus was baptizing whoever, and then we kind of discussed that and looked at other scripture and said, well, Jesus wasn't really somebody who was baptizing. In fact, it says right here that his disciples did the baptizing, and but I guess he is the leader, so it was credited to him in the record. It says that Jesus baptized, John baptized, and John may have had other people doing baptisms also, but it was just kind of credited, if you will, to who was in charge of the group. But we kind of agreed that Jesus himself was not here to baptize, because first of all, he's the Son of God, and so it would be a little odd for him to baptize in his own name. If he were baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, so you'd have to kind of phrase it differently if it was him doing it. And then also that some might get carried away and say, well, I'm special because Jesus baptized me, and you only had Peter baptize you or something. So therefore we kind of concluded that Jesus was not doing the baptizing, but his disciples were, even as it says here in verse 2. Okay, so we have a change of scenery, right? He was in the Judea area, which is mainly the Jerusalem is within the Judea area. He was there for the Passover and so forth, and now he's going to make his way out of there and kind of head back toward where he came from, back toward Galilee. Let's sketch out just a little rough map here, right? All right, so we'll put Galilee up here, Judea down here. Within Judea is Jerusalem. Okay, and within Galilee, there was a town called Cana of Galilee, and that's where the wedding took place. All right, the wedding where Jesus turned the water into wine took place in Cana of Galilee, right, which is kind of his home area. Right, I'll offer one more name in here, which is Nazareth, which is also in the same general area. Okay, so this is like all one area. And this is all one area, okay? So that, when they mention different names, there's the big name for the area, kind of like as if it was like a state in the United States, right? Pennsylvania, then within that you have Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and so forth. This could be New Jersey, you have Trenton or Newark and so forth, all right? So that's kind of how it works. So we'll just refer to those two for now. So Jerusalem was the holy city. That he was there for the Passover and so forth, and now he's leaving there. He's headed back toward Galilee, okay?
And he must needs go through Samaria. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour.
What mode of transportation do you think Jesus and his group were taking from Judea to Galilee? They were walking. Okay, so they were walking from here to there, right? And it was some number of miles. Let's say it's 50 miles, maybe, or roughly that. Okay, so it's a good hike, and it was going to take probably several days to get there, right? So as he's traveling now, it says he's passing through another area, right? Kind of in the middle, right? Which we'll call Samaria, right? And then within that, there's a city called Sychar. Right, so that's in the middle. So as you can see from what was written there, it says he must needs go through Samaria, right? Because it's in between. right? So to not go through there, it would probably be a pretty roundabout route to have to avoid that. So as he goes from here to here, he's got to pass through there, right? So as you see in 5, it says he came to a city within Samaria called Sychar, right? And so it says near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph, and Jacob's well was there. So now it says Jesus, therefore being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well to rest, right? And it was about the 6th hour. Right? Now, do you know what time the 6th hour is? The day, if you will, was a 12-hour day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., which would be basically like your hours of daylight, and then the night was 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., right? So when they counted off the hours, they were counting from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., so if it was about the 6th hour, it would have been about noon, right? So which makes sense, it's about the middle of the day, probably the hottest part of the day, so it was time to take a rest by the well.
There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans.
Right, so the scene is that Jesus has stopped here in this town of Sychar within the area of Samaria, and he's sitting on the well. And as you can see, it says, now here comes a woman, a local woman from Samaria to draw water. And Jesus said, gee, I'm kind of thirsty. It'd be nice if you give me a drink here out of the well, right? Because she came with the right equipment to draw water out of the well, right? So it says at 8, his disciples were gone away to the city to buy meat, so he was there by himself. Right? Whoever was traveling with him, that they went to the market. And so Jesus was just resting here, and now this woman came and said, gee, I'm kind of thirsty. How about you give me a drink? And the woman is like, talking to me? Right? And she's surprised that he would speak to her. I mean, first of all, just in general, I mean, a man speaking to a woman was, who we didn't know was a little out of place, all right, because the women were not at the same, considered the same level as the men, so like they wouldn't even waste their time speaking to them, typically a typical man, all right, so I mean, there was that, all right, but now there's an additional factor going on here, right, where it's just, I'm a woman of Samaria, so I'm surprised you would talk to me. This is for the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Right now, you've probably heard from time to time as we preach, different sermons, or when we mention the Samaritans. Usually, it comes out that something about the Samaritans that where the Jews didn't really either speak to them or get along with them or so forth. So I kind of took that as my question for tonight to say, why is that? Why would they not have dealings with them? Why would they not speak to them? So let me read you a paragraph here, right? The whole relation between the Jews and the Samaritans. It says, hatred between the Jews and the Samaritans was fierce and long-standing. In some ways, dated all the way back to the days of the patriarchs. Jacob, or Israel, had 12 sons, which we've said other times, whose descendants became the 12 tribes of Israel. And Joseph was his favorite, and he was despised by the other brothers. And so they attempted to kill him, but God intervened, saved his life, and used him to preserve the life of the whole family. Before his death, Jacob allotted a fertile plot of land to the tribes of Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. This land eventually became known as Samaria. Right? So Samaria was that was the land that was left to Joseph's descendants, Joseph being the favorite. Right? And if you remember what we just read, right, a couple verses ago, in verse 5 of this chapter, it says, when they came to Samaria, called Sychar, near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph, right? And it says, and Jacob's well was there. So in other words, this was like one of the favorite areas. So if you remember the story of Joseph and the coat of many colors and how the brothers hated him, so I'm sure, yes, he eventually saved the family and was the hero, but yet now here, even Jacob at his death gave the better plot of land to Joseph's descendants, and so I'm sure that created other jealousy there. So that number one put the Samaritans on the bad list, right? Because they were the favorites at that point, right? But there's more to it. It says years later, the nation of Israel was divided into 2 nations, as it says in 1 Kings chapter 12. Israel was composed of the 10 tribes to the north, and the south was made up of Judah and Benjamin. Right, so it's split into 2 nations, 10 to the north, 2 to the south. It's kind of almost like a civil war, if you will. Right, they split into 2 nations. the animosity between the Jews who were of the south and the Israelites began immediately after the division. Samaria was the capital city of the northern kingdom, right? So here, as they split, those who were to the south hated the ones from the north, and Samaria was the capital city of the north, right? But there's more. It says in 722 BC, Assyria conquered Israel, the northern kingdom, and took most of its people into captivity. The invaders then brought in Gentile colonists to resettle the land. The foreigners brought with them their pagan idols, which began to be worshipped alongside the God of Israel. Intermarriages with the Assyrians also took place, contrary to the teaching in Deuteronomy chapter 7. So they mixed in with the Gentiles who were there, and making mixed marriages. And so this is why the Jews hated the Samaritans as dogs or half-breeds. Right? They considered them beneath them because they had mixed in with the Gentiles and they didn't keep their nation pure. Right? So when you consider all those different things, that they were considered the favorites for the land, it was the capital city of the other half, and then they mixed in with the Assyrians and made the half-breeds. Right? So with the above as background, it's no surprise that the woman at the well in John chapter 4 was so surprised that Jesus would speak to her, since, as she said, the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Right? So that's kind of a little bit of background as to why the Jews hated the Samaritans. So now it still is, you consider it, like say from the perspective of today, you think of today, the way different people treat different people. I mean, it was basically racism, right? And, just because of who they were, their background, that they wouldn't speak to them, right? It had nothing to do with the individuals. Oh, you're a Samaritan. Okay, I don't want anything to do with you. Right? So that's the way the average Jew would treat a Samaritan. So them beneath them, below them, not worthy of talking to them, and they would walk right past them on the street. They didn't even want to go through Samaria, which is probably why it's recorded that Jesus basically had to go through Samaria to go from here to here. Maybe others would have done this and taken the longer route just to not even set foot in the city. Right? But of course, we know Jesus is not the average person, so that's why he's for everybody. So that's why he sat and I spoke to this woman who was from Samaria, and now she's surprised because he's willing to speak to her. Like, me? You want me to give you a drink? I'm surprised you even speak to me.
Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle?
Right, so responding to the question of the woman, saying, I'm surprised you would even speak to me. So Jesus says, if thou knewest the gift of God, and basically, and who it is that said that to you, in other words, if you really knew who I was, right, you would ask me to give you a drink. Right, it says you would say, give me to drink, that thou wouldst ask of him, and he would have given thee living water. Right, that you would have asked for me to give you a drink, I would have given you living water. Right, now at this point, the woman doesn't know what he's talking about. Right, so as she says in 11, so wait a minute, what are you talking about? You don't even have anything to draw water with. How are you going to get water out of the well? I'm the one that has the equipment here, and you got nothing, right? And so how are you going to get water out to give me a drink? So why would I then think to ask you for a drink, because you got nothing to serve me with, right? It says you have nothing to draw with, the well is deep, so where's this living water coming from? And he says, are you greater than our father Jacob, who made the well? I mean, he's the one who made the well, and somehow you can get water out without even having anything to draw with. You must be somebody special if you can do that for me. All right. So now she's confused as to how he could say that. I could give you water, and if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand.
Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again, but whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water, springing up into everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw.
All right, so after the woman asks him this, his response, as you see there, it says, okay, let me explain this way. You see this water in this well? Say, whoever drinks this water, you're going to be thirsty again later, right? I mean, yeah, maybe it quenches your thirst for the moment, but obviously in a little while you're going to be thirsty again. He says, but the water that I give you, says if you drink that, you'll never thirst again. So now my water's a lot better than this water, because I'm ready to give you water where you can never be thirsty. Says, the water I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. And so now the woman says, give it to me. Right? Yeah, I want that, all right? But still, she's a little confused, because she says, give me this water that I thirst not, neither cometh hither to draw. Hey, if you give me this water and I never thirst again, I'll never have to come here and bother getting water out of this well anymore, because I'm never going to be thirsty again, right? Which, of course, again, as we know, is not really what he's talking about, right? But so she's interested, but not really understanding yet, right? Saying, you guys can have a magic water where I could never be thirsty. That sounds good. It's fine. I don't have to come and get water out of this well anymore. I can just never be thirsty again.
Jesus saith unto her, Go call thy husband and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that saidst thou truly. The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet.
Now you might wonder at first what the next thing that Jesus has to do with what the woman was saying, or what he was saying earlier, right? But you'll see where he's headed with this when she said, okay, well, give me this water, this way I don't have to come to the well anymore. So he sees, well, okay, you're not really getting it, right? You're thinking I'm offering some kind of magic water, right? That's not what this is about. So that's why you see he says, tell you what, go call your husband and tell him to come here, and then we'll talk. And as you see her response, I don't have a husband. And now, without saying anything more, Jesus tells her exactly, well, of course, you don't have a husband now, but you've had 5 husbands, and you're living with somebody now who's not your husband, right? So he tells her exactly what her past has been, and here it's a total stranger that he's just met by the well, right? So the woman says, whoa, he says, you gotta be a prophet, right? I mean, how did you know this about me? Right? This is before Google, all right, and so forth in the case, so it's not like you could have searched the records to find this, all right? And for that matter, he didn't even know her name. So, but yet here he knew all this about her, that she had 5 husbands and was in fact living with somebody now who was not her husband. So now she's like, okay, wait a minute, there's something really unusual about this man now. It's just why I perceive that you're a prophet, that you would know this about me without even knowing who I am.
Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth.
Remember, he's headed to making a point here with this woman. He's only got a short window of time with the woman. He's got to somehow get the point across without giving it away, I'll say, too quickly, where she's going to be like, you're crazy. So he's taking it step by step, all right? So let's say first, he makes the statement about the water, then he makes a statement about her marital situation and her past, which showing that he's has some insight and some I'll call it supernatural ability or knowledge, right? And now he's going to talk a little further. Well, first, the woman is saying what the difference is between us and you, is the way she's putting it, right? It says, our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you say that Jerusalem's the place that we need to go. Right? This was, again, the north versus the south thing that I talked about earlier, right? The idea that Samaria was the capital of the north, and Jerusalem was the south. So Jerusalem was the holy city, right? The place where the Passover took place and so forth. So she's saying, we're not even coming from the same point of view here, right? That your fathers or your ancestors say that Jerusalem's the place to go. We worship right here in these mountains right up here in the northern part of the country. So but Jesus has a response for that. So 21 says, Jesus says, Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when ye shall neither in this mountain nor at Jerusalem worship the Father. Right? It's not going to be tied to any particular place. Right? It says, right now you worship you know not what. And we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But it says the hour is coming, in 23, when the true worshiper shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. In other words, you'll worship him in spirit, because it says 24, God's a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So in other words, he's a spirit. He's not somebody who lives in Jerusalem or lives in these mountains or lives anywhere else. He's a spirit. He's everywhere. So you'll be able to worship him wherever you are. Worship him in your homes or in any city. It doesn't have to be Jerusalem or Samaria or any place in particular. It could be anywhere, and God is there because he's a spirit. You're going to be worshiping in spirit and in truth. So he's introducing like a new concept to this woman, something she would never have heard or understood before.
The woman saith unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. Jesus saith unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. And upon this came his disciples, and marveled that he talked with the woman. Yet no man said, What seekest thou, or why talkest thou with her?
Right now, it would seem to me that the woman's being a pretty good straight man here, right? Because she's asking all the right questions, which leads him to the next point. Right? It says in 25, it says, the woman said, I know that the Messiah is coming, which is called Christ. It says, and when he comes, he'll tell us all things, right? So, in other words, right now, maybe we're confused, but we know that the Messiah is going to come, and then he'll straighten everything out, and he'll tell us the way things need to be, right? And now you see in 26, there's not even any hinting or whatever. I mean, Jesus just says it straight out. So Jesus said unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. Right? So you think you're waiting for the Messiah, you're waiting for Christ to come. Well, guess who you just met, right? Who you're talking to is exactly who you're referring to, right? I'm the Messiah and I'm the Christ that you're waiting for. Right? So again, not hinting at it, you don't have to guess, just said it straight out. And with the background of him having known everything about her, and all the talk about the living water and God being a spirit and in truth, right? So this was enough that, from what we can tell by what's going to follow, that she believed it, right? Because he had proved enough that she was, or revealed enough to show that he was somebody different, and she was able to accept that he was the Christ, the Messiah. After this happens, 27 says, upon this, or into the scene comes his disciples, and says, first of all, it says that he marveled that he talked with the woman. In other words, we left you alone here, and now you're having a conversation with this woman. What's this all about? He says, but yet no man said, what seekest thou, or why talkest thou with her? In other words, they might have been wondering what's going on, but I guess they trusted him enough to say, well, I guess he has a reason to be talking to her. It wasn't one of those things where how it is, you walk up, so what's going on here? Got a little special friend here or what? I guess they weren't necessarily saying anything, but they're probably wondering why is he talking to this woman here? Because they had missed the whole conversation. But this is when they came back from the market. They had gone to buy the meat.
The woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city, and saith to the men, Come see a man which told me all things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? Then they went out of the city and came unto him.
The conversation is over at this point, right? So that's why it says, now the woman then left her water pot behind by the well. It says, went into the city and started telling people what happened. Said, hey, come and see this guy. It says he told me, which told me all things that I ever did. Is not this the Christ, right? I mean, you got to meet this guy. He just met me for the first time, and he's telling me how many husbands I've had, and that I'm living with somebody who's not my husband, and he knows everything about me, and I never even met him before. Right? This has to be the Christ. And so again, I guess she was convincing enough that in 30 it says then they went out of the city and came unto him. So again, instead of saying no, you're crazy, but she was convincing enough that they said, all right, let's go meet them and see if we agree with you.
In the meanwhile, his disciples prayed him, saying, Master, eat. But he said unto them, I have meat to eat that ye know not of. Therefore said the disciples one to another, Hath any man brought him aught to eat? Jesus saith unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work.
Now in 31 says in the meanwhile, right? So you got two scenes going on here, right? That the woman's in the city telling the men about him, and in the meanwhile, it says the disciples are there with Jesus. They're saying, "Hey, you got to eat something, Master, eat." And so he says, "I have meat to eat that ye know not of." Right? It's an interesting response. Right here, he sent them to the market to get meat, and then they bring the meat, and he says, "No, I don't need your meat. I got my own to eat." So what are you talking about? What do you mean you got to get your own meat to eat? So that's why 33 says, "Therefore said the disciples one to another, hath any man brought him aught or anything to eat? Right? In other words, how did he get this from? He didn't have anything when we left, so did any of you give him something to eat? He's saying he doesn't need ours because he's got his own meat to eat here, which we don't even know anything about. Right? I'd probably be confused too probably with that and say, what's he talking about? Right? But now in 34, finally, he says what it is that he's talking about, and I like the way he puts it. It says, Jesus says unto them, my meat is to do the will of him that sent me and to finish his work. Right? That's what he considered his meat was to, I was sent for a purpose. I was sent to bring salvation to people. The one who sent me, that's what I'm here to do. So that's my meat, right? In other words, I can live on this because this is what I'm here to do. So in other words, the conversation you had with the woman, this is what I was here to do. I'm not here to just have a ham sandwich, all right? I'm here to preach the gospel. I'm here to present myself as the Christ. I'm here to convince people of who I am. And that's what's happening here right now, this very day. So that's the most important thing to me. So I could care less about having a sandwich right now because this is what I'm focused on, doing what I came here to do. So my meat is to do the will of him that sent me and to finish his work.
Say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes, and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. And he that reapeth receiveth wages, and gathereth fruit unto life eternal, that both he that soweth and he that reapeth may rejoice together. And herein is that saying true, one soweth and another reapeth. I sent you to reap that whereon ye bestowed no labor. Other men labored, and ye are entered into their labors.
So now he's going to express it in terms that we've heard other times about the harvest and the laborers. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few, right? So they use that example fairly frequently about the harvest. So it starts out by saying it's only 4 months till the harvest time, but that was the real harvest time, the time when they would harvest whatever they were growing. So that's what people understood. They understood the idea we plant, and at certain times of the year we harvest, we pick and so forth. All right, so you plant, you water, you tend, you harvest. Right, it was a whole cycle. Right, but that's not what I'm talking about. It says, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they're white already to harvest. All right, see, it's 4 months till we harvest our crops, or to you harvest your crops. But to me, if you look out on the fields that I'm talking about, it's already ready to harvest, right? And so what field is he talking about? Talking about the field where it's the souls to harvest, right? And that's ready today. That's ready to harvest right now. We don't have to wait 4 months for that. It's time right now to harvest souls, as it is any day. So that's what he's saying. He said that this is what I'm here for. This is what the Father sent me for, was to harvest souls, and the fields are ripe and white right now, ready to be harvested. Right? So 36 says, he that reapeth receiveth wages and gathereth fruit unto the eternal, right? That's the kind of things that we're talking about. Okay, this says that both he that soweth and he that reapeth may rejoice together, right? So in other words, we're here to work together to build up the kingdom of God. Right? You're going to see the difference between sowing and reaping, right? The sowing is the ones who does the planting, right? You have those who plant, those who tend to it, and then those who reap, right? So there's different jobs. I mean, maybe for some farms the same people do everything, but the idea is that you could have different people doing different things, and yet it's all for the same purpose. That at the end you're happy that for what's been grown and harvested and ready to eat. Or in the case that we're talking about here, you have those who maybe introduce people to Christ, and then those who help bring them along, and those who talk to them until they're converted, right? And then maybe those who nurture them afterward. Everybody works together, but yet it's the end result is something that everyone can celebrate together as souls come to Christ. All right, so that's the example they're trying to give out to his disciples, right? Because again, they're not totally up to speed either, obviously, since they're still pretty new to this and still trying to learn who he is and what it is he's here to do. So he's explaining it in terms that they can understand when they talk about the harvest and reaping and sowing and so forth.
And many of the Samaritans of that city believed on him for the saying of the woman, which testified, he told me all that ever I did. So when the Samaritans were come unto him, they besought him that he would tarry with them, and he abode there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word, and said unto the woman, now we believe, not because of thy saying, for we have heard him ourselves, and know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world.
The woman had returned to the city, right, within Samaria, and she told the Samaritans who were there that she met this man and that she believed he was the Christ, right? And so, as it's seen 39, it says, many of the Samaritans in the city believed on him based on what she said. When she testified, he told me all that I ever did. So some believed just based on that, all right? It says, so the Samaritans went and met him. As you see in 40, it says they invited him to stay around for a while. I guess somebody invited him to stay at their house. And so it says he stayed with them for a couple of days. And so I'm sure they talked. He presented who he was. And so as 41 says, many more believed because of his own words. In other words, upon meeting Jesus, they were convinced themselves as they had a face-to-face encounter with him. And then in 42, I guess, some felt the need to tell the woman, we believe in him, not because of what you said, right, but because of what he said, right? That basically we got to meet him ourselves and talk to him ourselves and hear him express himself. And so now, based on that, so we've heard him ourselves and know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world. So I guess the end result was the same. They were convinced of who he was, but of course it was the woman who had at least set it all up by introducing them to him and telling them about him, and so they had the chance to meet him, and now they were convinced as well that this was the Christ. Okay, so it's starting from one woman here, at the well. So here that she met Jesus, she believed, and now she turned around and told others, and others got to meet him and believe also. And if you think about it, that's really how it's in general supposed to work today, right? That anybody who meets the Christ can then turn around and tell others, and then they get to meet him also.
Now after 2 days he departed thence and went into Galilee. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet hath no honor in his own country. Then when he was come into Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things that he did at Jerusalem at the feast, for they also went unto the feast.
All right, so after the 2 days were done, that Jesus spent 2 days in Samaria. It wasn't his original plan to stay there, but he was supposed to be passing through, but he stayed there for a couple of days. So after the 2 days, he continued on into Galilee, so he continued on up, right, and eventually arriving at his hometown, right? But yet you see in 44, all right, he's kind of mentioning that, and this pops up in other places, that a prophet has no honor in his own country. If you think of how it would work, right, let's just say if somebody grew up here in the town of Levittown, all right, and somebody who we knew from a child, and then they grew up and they show up and they say, I'm the son of God, all right, or I'm a prophet, all right, whatever, that's so and so from down the street. Yeah, he's always got these delusions of grandeur or something, So you tend not to believe because it's somebody who you know too well, right? So you can't really get your arms around that this might be somebody actually special and that God put them here, right? Because it's just little Johnny from down the block, all right? So that's why he's saying in general it's tough for a prophet to be honored in his own country because people think they know him too well, right? So that's why a lot of times he had actually, I'll say, a hard time accomplishing much in his hometown because again, this is the carpenter's son, right? Go build me a chair, So they didn't really, recognize him for who he was, right? But having said that, in 45 it says when he did arrive in Galilee, it says the Galileans received him, right? And having seen all the things that he did at Jerusalem, for they had been there and they saw that he did some miracles. They saw that something special was happening. So there were people who were interested because now they saw something that Jesus was doing that maybe they hadn't seen before, and so the people were actually interested in knowing what was going on with him.
So Jesus came again into Cana of Galilee, where he made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus was come out of Judea into Galilee, he went unto him, and besought him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then said Jesus unto him, Except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe.
All right, so it says Jesus came to Cana of Galilee, all right, which again was the site of that wedding from a couple chapters ago, where he turned the water into wine. Right, and now he encounters what's referred to as a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum, okay, which was another town not far from there. Okay, Capernaum is kind of right over here, right? All right, yeah, so it's right over there next to Galilee, so it wasn't too far. Okay, so it says the nobleman says to him, hey, my son's really sick. It would be nice if he could come and heal him. All right, as it says in 47, it says when he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea, was back in Galilee, he thought he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. All right, so here his son was on his deathbed, and he's, basically, I heard about you, Jesus, and I heard you can do things. So, my son's like at the point of death, and, he can certainly understand he would be upset that his son was dying, and so was showing faith that he would be willing to invite Jesus to come and heal him, right? But yet you see Jesus' response in 48, he says, except you see signs and wonders, you won't believe. So just kind of commenting in general that, if you remember the last couple of chapters, we talked about the miracles and how some people just were hanging around to see miracles, almost like Jesus was kind of a magician doing magic tricks, turning water into wine and so forth, right? So he said that's really all you people are interested in, is just seeing all these miracles or tricks or signs or wonders or so forth, right? So that was his first reaction, was that, you're just looking for another wonder here, another, amazing thing to happen. Right, so that basically he's testing the guy to see what it is he's after, right? Is it just you're trying to set me up and say, okay, good, let's see you do this now. All right, you turn water into wine. All right, now we got a dying kid. Let's see you do something with him, all right? So he just wants to see what it is that he's after here.
The nobleman saith unto him, Sir, come down ere my child die. Jesus saith unto him, Go thy way, thy son liveth. And the man believed the word that Jesus had spoken unto him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Thy son liveth.
All right, so the nobleman gave a good response, all right, that he really believed that Jesus could heal his son. That's why he says in 49, he says, Sir, come down ere my child die, right? And the word ere means before, right? So that's why he's saying, so come before my child dies. It really would be important for me that you would come and make him better, right? Now, did Jesus go with him? He didn't, right? Because he made it even simpler than that. In 50, it says, Jesus says unto him, Go thy way, thy son liveth. Right? So basically, just go and everything's going to be fine. Right? You don't even need me to show up. Right? I'm just going to say that your son's going to be okay, and so go home and your son's going to be okay. Right? So it says that the man believed that Jesus had spoken those words, or that was true, and he went his way, right, and back to Capernaum. It says, and as he was on his way there, back to Capernaum, as you can see, it says his servant met him and told him, saying, Thy son liveth, all right? So your son has recovered, even as he was on his way home.
Then inquired he of them the hour when he began to amend, and they said unto him, Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in the which Jesus said unto him, Thy son liveth, and himself believed, and his whole house. This is again the second miracle that Jesus did when he was come out of Judea into Galilee.
If it was me, I remembering that Jesus said these words, I would probably want to know something and say, well, I want to attach these things, not that my son just magically got better, but now I want to believe that Jesus speaking it was really what happened. So he asked the servant a question. What time did he get better? What time did his fever break? Or what time did the sickness leave him? When did it happen? Because he knew at that time he was having a conversation with Jesus. So you can see he said, yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. The 7th hour would be 1 o'clock p.m. So around 1 o'clock the fever left him. Right? So then the father knew. Okay, 1 o'clock yesterday, I was talking to Jesus, and Jesus said, go thy way, thy son liveth. All right, so clearly, Jesus saying the words made the fever break, and then the son got better. It was the time that it said, thy son liveth, and himself believed in his whole house. All right, so that was enough proof, certainly, for this man to say that just Jesus, by saying the words, made his son recover, because right at that moment was when the fever left him. Right, and then in 54, it's just a comment. It says this is the second miracle that Jesus did, and at least within Galilee. This is when he came out of Judea into Galilee, right? This was the second miracle was recorded there. The first recorded, of course, was the water into the wine, and now this was the second one in Galilee as he healed the nobleman's son, and the nobleman and his family were convinced upon witnessing this that this was in fact Jesus, the Son of God, the Savior of the world.